Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. I'm Tom Keene, along with Paul Sweeney. Join us each day for insight from the best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. You can also watch the show live on YouTube. Visit the Bloomberg Podcast channel on YouTube to see the show weekday mornings from 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern from our global headquarters in New York City. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen, and always on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Terminal, and the Bloomberg Business app. I'm going to go a little bit nerdy here right now as a precursor to get into Bill Dudley with his exceptionally important essay of the morning, and I'll be quick about this, folks. When we have Richard Clarida on, the former vice chairman of the Fed, there's a whole academics behind him that has a big fancy name that's called DSGE, Dynamic Stochastic General Equilibrium Theory. This is PhD work. A guy named Carl Walsh, who came out of the same Berkeley Combine as Bill Dudley, years ago wrote on the contracts, the agreements, the beliefs that a central bank has. Ben Bernanke said it was one of the three most important papers on how central banks think. Joining us now on how this central bank thinks, William Dudley, the former president of the New York Fed. Bill, we've shattered ex post, ex ante beliefs. How far behind is this central bank?
Well, hard to say with any precision, but I think it's pretty simple to say that the dual mandate objectives of inflation and employment now are pretty close in balance, yet monetary policy is still quite restrictive. Most people think that neutral is somewhere between 3 and 4% on the federal funds rate. So call us, 150 basis points away from where we should be.
If we have a vector of whatever it is, economic growth, disinflation, whatever we draw up in our minds, Peter Orszag would call it a glide path. Which is the glide path right now that matters to Bill Dudley that says this Fed's got to get up and go?
Well, I think the main issue is the fact that when the labor market tends to deteriorate, it either tends to deteriorate a little or a lot. So you don't want to go past that threshold where the labor market starts to feed on itself and continue to worsen. That's why you want to take out insurance now by going more rapidly rather than going gradually.
So, Bill, in your Bloomberg Opinion piece today, you note that the two objectives of the Fed's dual mandate, that is price stability and maximum sustainable employment, that they've come into much closer balance, suggesting that monetary policy should be neutral. But we're pretty far from neutral. So how do we get to neutral, and how quickly do we do that, Bill?
Well, I think the reason why the Federal Reserve is going to do 50 basis points this week is to get there more quickly. Now, the good news is a lot of easing's already priced in over the next year and a half. So the market's priced in 250 basis points by the end of 2025. So it's not absolutely critical that they do 50 versus 25 today, but doing 25 would have been awkward because it would have disappointed market expectations. They probably would have shown only another 50 basis points in their summary of economic projections. So the Fed would be essentially saying we're only going to do 75 basis points this year when the market was priced for about 120. So I think doing 50 brings the Fed more in alignment with the market, and it also fits the logic of the moment.
Bill, do you have a concern or a reasonable concern that by maybe going slower than they should, that inflation gets back, recession gets pulled back onto the table?
Well, I think there's a risk of that. I mean, every time the unemployment rate has risen by more than 0.5% on a 3-month moving average basis over a 12-month period in the United States, you've always had a recession. We've actually hit that trigger. Now, I don't think that trigger is a hard and fast rule that has to hold every time, but it does tell you that when the labor market deterioration goes on beyond a certain point, it tends to become self-reinforcing. The next, stop after a 0.5% increase is 1.9 percentage points in a full-blown recession. So that's the risk the Fed's taking by waiting.
Hey, if the Fed only goes 25 basis points, do you think we'll get a dissenting vote there?
I would think so at this point. I mean, I think what's essentially happened is the Fed changed expectations last week with those two articles that came out in the Wall Street Journal and the Financial Times, sort of suspicious articles, because they basically reopened the possibility of 50 when that was sort of getting closed off. Since that time, we haven't had any, Fed intervention in any way that's visible. So it seems at least that the Fed is comfortable with the shift in expectations away from 25 to 50. So I don't think, as time passes, I think what's going to happen is we're going to continue to price more in the direction of 50.
Okay, I'm going to go nuts here. And, thanks. Marty emailed it. Marty, thank you so much for listening this morning.
On the fifth floor.
Bill, I'm sorry. We've got a shattered way of communicating. We have basically, back X number of meetings, a dissent-free Fed. I mean, love, peace, love, and dope. I get it. We are the world. We are committing Fed policy and discussion through a reporter at the Journal. Who's the reporter at the FT?
I don't know.
Smith? Oh, Colby Smith.
Colby Smith.
Yeah, Colby Smith. Okay. Come on, Bill, this is baloney. How did we get here? Do you blame Alan Greenspan? Lawrence Meyer, Washington University, St. Louis, would say it was a term at the Fed where Alan read everything. Is that where this started, Bill Dudley?
I'm not really sure why we've landed where we've landed. I agree with you. This is sort of awkward. You really shouldn't be communicating through these sort of articles in such a subtle way that some people get it and some people don't. That doesn't seem to be very fair for people to get the right signal from the Fed. I think what basically happened was the issue of 25 versus 50 was getting sort of closed off as you approached the blackout period. Powell didn't want it to be closed off because he was actually thinking pretty strongly about 50 basis points. And this was the way to keep it open. And I think what's happened is people have reflected on it a bit more. The logic for 50 has become very compelling to people. And that's why I think that's what the Fed's going to do at this meeting this week.
I want to make a distinction here. This is not an Alan Meltzer 50. I mean, we're not showing up at the discount window because the world's falling apart. Is this like an original 50 beep cut that we're getting because of pandemic mysteries, because of unknowns, or frankly, Dr. Dudley, because of too much information?
Well, I think they're just started a little late. I mean, a month ago or so, I said that they should have cut rates in July. So if they'd done 25 in July and 25 in September, they'd be in the same place. So I think it's a little bit because the labor market has weakened more quickly than they were anticipating. Remember, we had those very large downward revisions to payroll employment. And then the last 3 months in terms of the payroll gains is the lowest 3-month period since 2020. So there's been a distinct chilling of the labor market, and that's happened fairly rapidly. Now, the Fed is, reasonably comfortable that that's mostly due to the fact that the labor force is increasing, and that's what's pushing up the unemployment rate. But there are quite a few signs that the labor market's a little softer than it was, and I think that's what's maybe surprised the Fed how quickly that's come on.
Is there, just following up on that labor point, Bill, is there a level of the unemployment rate, I don't know, a headline number that would really get their attention, or is this trend higher that you mentioned before, is that what's going to push this Fed forward?
Well, I think you're exactly right. The labor market holds the key here. So if the unemployment rate keeps drifting up, that will continue to motivate the Fed to go more quickly. Because at that point, the risk won't be balanced. The risk will be tilted to the downside on the labor market. So right now, think of the risk as balanced. We want to go to neutral. Labor market continues to deteriorate. Unemployment rate keeps going up. The Fed will then start to think, we don't want to push policy to neutral. Right. we might want to push policy to easy.
Bill Dudley, you've got a key paragraph where you touch upon what, Vice Chairman Claret has talked about and many others. Thrilled folks, the Fed decides on Wednesday. I can't believe it'll be better than the last time we did it 6 weeks ago, but we'll try. And the answer is, Dr. Dudley, is the vectors in place of, let's say, disinflation for conversation. But are we getting back to 2.0? Do you simply discard what I'm going to call a John Taylor 2.0 banded endpoint? Is there a new endpoint that jumbles up all of our thinking?
I think the Fed thinks that they're going to get back to something close to 2%. I mean, if you look at the labor market right now, for example, labor job openings are at a level consistent with where we were in 2019, where inflation was actually below 2%. The other thing that's sort of should make you more confident that is what's been happening to wage inflation. That's come down below 4%. So I think the Fed is not like giving up and saying, 2.5% inflation is good enough. I think they do think that we'll see further disinflation in the months ahead.
So, Bill, we look at the 2-year Treasury. I mean, just a cup of coffee ago, as Tom would say, it was at 5%. We're down to 3.55% on the 2-year Treasury. I mean, the market's already doing the hard work here, aren't they?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, financial conditions have eased a lot, even though the Federal Reserve hasn't yet cut rates. And that obviously makes monetary policy work more quickly than it has in the past.
Right.
But that said, low and moderate income households, are affected by the current level of short-term rates in terms of credit card debt, auto debt. So the current level of short-term rates still matters a bit.
One of the great moments of my career, folks, and I'm sure Dr. Dudley doesn't remember this, we were at some whatever, the coffee was expensive, and Bill Dudley was chowing down the croissants, as I remember. And we were talking about an America in the age of retirement, and Bill went mental, and full Goldman Sachs mental. And he said, Tom, some people have to retire at 60 because their bodies are broken. Bill, that was an indication of your work, your canonical work, which is there's two Americas out there. Are we committing monetary policy for the haves, the elite, the major financial system people that benefit from financialization, and this whole debate ignores an America essentially flat on their back?
Well, I actually think the primary motivation for the interest rates cuts is the deterioration for the low and moderate income workers. If you sort of think about the consumer spending reports we've gotten recently, it's all about stress at the low end, and I think that's what's motivating the Fed to cut rates more quickly. So I think they're definitely taking that into consideration.
Dr. Dudley, thank you so much. Bill Dudley, without question, the essay of the day at Moved Markets worldwide. Look to Bloomberg Opinion. I'll get that out on Twitter and LinkedIn here any moment, but it'll be widely distributed today. Bill Dudley of Berkeley and, of course, of Goldman Sachs, the former president of the New York Federal Reserve System for Bloomberg Opinion. Without further ado, in a different conversation than we would have had Friday, Henrietta Treyz joins with Veda Partners. Henrietta, America's violent. We all know that, whatever our political persuasions. Are our candidates going to really have to start limiting their exposure after this second assassination attempt?
It's an interesting question. The Secret Service has talked for a while now about how the golf courses in particular and former President Trump's time on the golf courses poses a unique problem to them. I would say that members on Capitol Hill and the task force associated with the first assassination attempt are going to explore that pretty robustly. I mean, they've been concerned about these outdoor rallies and then also golf courses. I'm not aware of any other areas that are a major concern for them. But those are two, and that's obviously what happened yesterday.
Are we benumbed to the chaos? I mean, the headline gunfire at Trump Golf Club, latest jolt in chaotic 2024 race. Henrietta, is this America numb in this odd election campaign?
I think at this point, it's not wrong to say that. I would just, point to the market and point to the reaction that we have not seen from markets in the way that we saw back in the early part of this summer when there was sort of an explosive response to the first assassination attempt. So I do think there is a bit of numbing. Obviously, no one was harmed in this case, thankfully. So it's very different, a stark contrast to the first one. And I would maybe point out that the problem we have here, the sort of very discomforting piece for me, is we're going to have data to back up where people feel this attempt was resonating from. Was it from a lone gunman? Was it from, members of one political party or another? We're going to have data that contrasts yesterday to earlier this summer. And that's going to be a really stark comp that I wish I didn't have to look at.
Henrietta, is there any way, or I guess the question is, how will both campaigns deal with this latest piece of news, do you think?
Well, I guess I'd back out just a little bit and say what investors should expect and what pollsters should be looking at or what we're going to get. The next data set is going to be the lag of data from the debate. So what I published for clients last night was that Harris has seen a pretty momentous rise in the polls. She was at, +1, +2, +3. Now she's in +4 to +6 range. And that doesn't even include the state specific data. So the next round of information we're going to receive should be very positive for Kamala Harris. And that's going to be really confusing because we just got this starkly negative data point against President Trump, former President Trump, with the attempted assassination. So there's going to be this very discordant release of data from polls that's obviously lagging and giving us last Tuesday's debate versus what has just happened. So I think it's probably going to be superseded rather quickly. And then we won't see anything from President Trump's uptake, if there is any in the polls, until next week. I guess if you wanted to see it quicker than that, look at fundraising data and Republican voter registration data. That's probably the best we're going to get.
So, Henrietta, what's the schedule for the coming week for both of these candidates here? Are they campaigning hard, and are they focusing just on these, 6 or 7 swing states?
Right. We're pretty much camped out in the swing states: Michigan, Nevada, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. The candidates are fanning out and going to different locales to the extent possible. The next big event we have isn't until October 1st with the vice presidential debate. Yeah. As you know, there have been no agreements on a second presidential debate. So we're really just wearing down the clock to October 1st.
I got the calendar up. Paul was warbling gaily, folks, and I was looking at the famed Bloomberg calendar. Tomorrow, folks, September 17th, it is 2 weeks to Lafayette College and CBS in a vice presidential debate. Mm-hmm. Henrietta, you got to sell me on this. Do I really have to stay up past surveillance bedtime for a vice presidential debate?
No, I don't think you do. And I know you wake up early. So definitely you do not, unless you want to see it. What's interesting about this one is that it is the most popular candidate on the trail, Tim Walz, who has an approval rating that is above water at plus 3.5%. versus the most unpopular candidate on the ballot this year, which is J.D. Vance, who's at negative 10.5% nationally. So you're going to have a pretty stark contrast. What I saw from the first presidential debate between Harris and Trump was that a lot of viewers, several million, tens of millions of viewers saw their information afterwards the next day. And so there's sort of a lag time in terms of how voters are receiving this information, particularly under the age of 45. So I think you can afford to go to sleep. You'll see the highlights the next day without question.
You bring that up. How's the youth vote? Look, this came up this weekend. What are young Latinos going to do? Young blacks, young this, young that. Are they going to show up?
Yeah, it really does look that way. Voter registration is through the roof. It was through the roof at about 184% for uptake from Black women following the DNC, 143% from Latino women following the DNC. And then in the wake of Taylor Swift's endorsement, you saw over 700,000 people in 24 hours go to vote.org to try to register. Those are principally youth voters. 400 some odd thousand of those were just from Taylor Swift's link alone. Wow. So, I would say there's going to be a pretty material uptick or a robust turnout from the youth demographic. And those would be your silent voters this year, because those people are not going to be on voter polls that are being called by pollsters. So, Paul, if Mott the Hoople endorsed somebody, will it have a big
I don't think it's going to have a big effect there. Henrietta, Vice President Harris, should she be doing media? Should she be doing a town hall? Should she be putting herself out there for the media and answering questions? She has not done much to date.
Yeah, I think that what the debate showed is that not only did voters have reticence to vote for her because they didn't know about her policy positions. I want to say it was something like 24% of voters said they wanted to learn more about her positions. And then you had the debate where obviously both candidates had an opportunity to talk about their positions, and voters responded very positively to what they heard. So if the Harris campaign is looking for a reason to either go into the media or not, the debate suggests that voters not only want the information, but were enthusiastic about what they heard. That's why Harris's numbers have widened against Trump. Her polling has risen into the 50 to 51% range, while Trump's has declined. So she serves as a contrast, and they like what they see.
So what are you doing this week? I mean, we got all this stuff swirling around. What's Henrietta Treyz's date calendar, things to do in this election this Monday and Tuesday?
I'm so glad you asked. I'm going to Fenway on Thursday.
Nice.
I can't wait. No, I'll be traveling up and down the East Coast this week, starting tomorrow in Philly, and then New York, and then Boston. And I am going to go to Fenway, and I'm thrilled.
Look at that, Tom.
Look at that.
I know. Player.
Can we get Henrietta the morning after she's at Fenway?
I'll get her when she's
she slides over across the turnpike to the Cask and Flagon. Brockton, I know Brockton shut the Cask and Flagon down that one night.
All right, very good.
She's going to be over there, under the Citgo sign.
Yep.
I can just see her.
Yep.
What a trooper. I don't even know who they're playing.
No.
I mean, they're done, right?
They're done.
Phillies won 90 games.
So
I want to see, like, Ken Rosenthal tell me, is 90 the new 103 games?
Yep.
It's really impressive.
Should be at Fenway.
Henrietta Treyz, we need to talk to you the day after you go to Fenway. Very important. Veda Partners. Henrietta Treyz, seriously there, folks, on the shock in this nation, the embarrassment in this nation of our violence. On the equity markets, the ramifications of what the central bank will do. Lori Calvasina, RBC Capital Markets. Lori, if we get 50 beeps, what will stocks do?
Well, I think it depends, as always, Tom, when we have these events, when we have these meetings. You may do one thing right after you get the announcement, and you may do an entirely different thing once you get to the press conference. So I think it depends on what the Fed ends up saying. I think investors are really focused on the idea of whether or not we're going to have that soft landing. Are we tipping into a recession? I am still in the camp. All due respect to those who have said otherwise, but I am still of the camp that a 50 basis point move does run the risk of spooking markets if we don't frame it properly.
So, Lori, whether it's 25 basis points or 50 basis points, it appears that the Fed is on a downward trajectory in rates. That's number one. Number two, earnings are pretty darn solid here.
Yeah.
Is it difficult not to be constructive on equities at this point?
I think at this point, it depends on your time horizon, Paul, is how I would put it. So I see some differences when I do my valuation modeling for 2025 versus 2024. 2024, I'll save you all the math, but I think that we're fully valued. I think we're already baking in a pretty good move lower in inflation and a pretty good, move lower in 10-year yields and Fed rate cuts. So I can't really justify a higher number on the multiple and the earnings for this year. That being said, markets can run hot. Our model's not perfect. It's just a rough guide. I can, though, when I even have some really conservative modeling for next year, I can get you to 6,150, 6,200 or so for the S&P in 2025. So again, I think, I sort of feel like in the short term, we're kind of full. I keep using that word. Right. Longer term, though, I can make a case for stock. So again, it really depends on your time horizon.
What's a rotation from the Magnificent 8, whatever it is, out to your Russell 2000? I'm going to say 1,000-point year-to-date difference. One's up 17%, the other's up 7%, whatever the numbers are. But the answer is, can you hedge that bet and maybe go short Mag 7, go long the Calvasina 2000?
Oh, look, I'm not someone who short bets, tend to sit well with in general. But I think the reality is that if you look at the earnings growth dynamics between the Mag 7 and the Russell 2000, something really exciting is happening, which is that if you look at the forecast, you've got a ramp down, kind of a slowing, a deceleration in earnings growth expectations for the Mag 7 bucket. Still fantastic growth, but just not nearly as hot as it was. Basically, they had an earnings recession in 2022, a big fat recovery in 2023, and now they're kind of coming back to earth a little bit. If you look at Russell 2000, it had its earnings recession basically a year and a half later, and it's starting to come out of that earnings recession now if you look at the forecast data, and it's expected to really ramp up next year and actually have faster growth rates than the Mag 7. So I don't know if that's necessarily a cause, a case to be made for being short on the Mag 7, but it does certainly make the case for broadening out. Now, you have to have a lot of other things go right as well. Those earnings estimates for Russell 2000 are not going to come true if the economy has a hard landing. But I think just on the earnings data alone, you can make a case for rotation.
Mag 7, Russell 2000, Vaxcyte, FTAI Aviation, Insmed, ready? Sprouts Farmers Market.
Nice.
Ensign Group, Fabrinet. This name I know, Muller Industries.
So, Lori, are there some sectors here that are screening well for you guys at RBC?
So I would say sector decisions, it feels like they're really tough right now. I think it does depend on which part of the market cap spectrum you're looking at. If we're looking at financials, for example, they look good to me in large cap. We're still overweight there, but they actually look a lot more interesting to me down in small cap from a valuation perspective. So I would say that one's screening really, really well. By contrast, if I look at a sector like industrials, where market weight that one, it looks it looks overvalued, frankly, in both large cap and small cap. But when I compare the multiples between small and large, I get a lot more excited about them in the small cap space. So I think it depends on how far market cap you're willing to go. And I think you can also, link it up with certain fundamental narratives as well.
Is Apple a growth stock, a value stock, or a value trap?
I'm going to punt that one, or I'm going to get a call from the compliance people later, just because we're not allowed to talk about individual stocks. But what I will tell you is...
Wait. Your compliance head is Halima Croft, right?
No. She's our rock star.
Lori,
she's our resident rock star, but not our compliance.
Lori, can you tell auditing at RBC the amount of food Halima Croft put down at the Pioneer Grill for breakfast? I mean, she had a full Wyoming. It was unbelievable. Check that Amex bill.
Halima Croft is multi-talented on many facets. I've worked with her for a number of years, so that does not surprise me at all. But, going back to the tech space, Tom, though, what I will tell you is the tech hardware and equipment group is one that does screen pretty good to us in the technology space. It's cheap. It's got upward earnings revision trends. Software, frankly, looks pretty good too, kind of neutral on valuation, positive on revisions. The semis are still problematic in the tech space. They're looking overvalued with negative revisions to us right now.
Single point, where's SPX a year from now? Right now, 5,600. Where are we a year from now?
So we haven't put out a target for next year, but the valuation modeling I mentioned to you, it can sort of get you to sort of 6,150, 6,200 by year end. I do have some other models that get you to a similar number at mid-year as well.
See, that's roaring 20s with Lori Calvasina.
Very good. Yep.
Lori Calvasina, thank you so much. RBC Capital Markets, greatly appreciate it. The daily look at the front page is the Lisa Mateo moment. Good morning, Lisa.
Good morning. This one stood out to me on the Washington Post. You've heard about children's savings account programs, more of them popping up in disadvantaged school districts. They pointed out the Bradbury Heights Elementary School over in Maryland is a Title I school. So parents went to, the back to school night. They were told that their kids will be eligible for at least $13,000 to cover the cost of college, vocational training, build up their wealth once they graduated, any one of those things. So it's kids from the classes of 2037, 2038. $1,000 each year from kindergarten through senior year of high school if they stay in the school system and graduate. So the parents are really happy. They say it's going to give their kids this kind of jump start in life. So I thought it was a really, really good story because you're seeing this more often nowadays.
Where does that money come from?
This one is a Greater Washington Community Foundation. They have this Brilliant Futures program, so they get the funding for it. And then it started back in June, this particular program, and now they have like about 400 students.
I'm seeing a new sense of desperation. I mean, across rich people in the middle. There's a whole new sense of this is just insane.
Well, I mean, the cost of higher education is crazy, and it's called into. I mean, some of these, you go into the trades. That is for a lot of people a way better opportunity than kind of pursuing a college track.
Good morning, listening in the evening of Australia where they get it right. They're just all they do. You go to school, you get out. And they take a teensweeny amount of your paycheck forever. I don't know the details. Uwe Reinhardt, the giant at Princeton, once told me that.
Okay.
Australia gets it right. America doesn't. Next.
More states are requiring students at publicly funded colleges to complete a civics course. So they get it in high school. They're saying they want it to be.
Wendy Schiller made you do this?
No, she did not. This is the Associated Press. Here's the thing. So studies show that a third of American adults, they can't name the 3 branches of the federal government.
No.
There's another study that shows 10% of college graduates thinks that TV's Judge Judy is on the Supreme Court. So this goes to show you where it's going. So now you have these colleges that want to do it. So they spoke with this professor at University of South Carolina, Beaufort. He said that he gives out the citizenship test to his students, and 35% of them will pass it. So it just goes to show you that this is the reasoning behind why more publicly funded colleges want to bring back civics to the curriculum.
Yeah, all right.
As Jeff Sachs said years ago in his seminal book on the Dumbing Down America, great book, he said, we're now at the point where the kids are dumb, the parents are dumb, even the grandparents are dumb. I mean, we are so far from civics of our youth is to be, like if I said right now to 100 people, who's Andrew Johnson? They'd have no clue. I mean, first president impeached, coming off of Lincoln and all that. Richard Haas has the book on this, folks. I'm not going to mince words. The Bill of Obligations. Read it, throw it at a child. Hit them on the head. The smart mouth college. Not that there's any smart mouth college kids at Lisa's house.
No,
but
not at all.
The bill of obligations. What do you got next?
I got to talk about Shogun. Okay, so
Thank you.
talked about it. I mean, I know you love the show. Top Emmy, first time in 19 years. So they did. They got 4 awards at the Emmys. But here's the thing. It set this record for the most wins by a single show in the year. 18 if you include the Primetime Emmys and then the Creative Arts Awards.
Wow.
So it really got all these. And they also
Tom was
won
early on
for
this.
The Bear. Yeah. So Disney's out in front, beat out Netflix, Warner Brothers Discovery for the most Emmys. So it just goes to show you.
I would love for Lucas at his wonderful panel coming up in LA when they talk to Shogun people. Were they advantaged by having a pandemic? Because the pandemic slowed down the production. They wrote the original screenplay, which was touchy-feely, woke American. And they said, this ain't working. It doesn't sound like Japanese. And they took the production to Japan and literally had Japanese do the screenplay in Japanese and translate it back to English with rewrites.
Interesting.
But I wonder if it would have been as successful without the delay of the pandemic to give them time to get it right.
Yeah, all right.
Very cool. I can't say enough about it, folks. All of the actors, the stars, and just wow. What do you got? Anything?
Yeah. So you talk about the younger generation and corporate life and what their views are.
She's doing this to get us
Well,
going.
this one you're gonna like. It says that Gen Zers are actually bragging about how happy they are about their jobs in corporate world. This is the oldest members of Gen Z are like 27, so this gives you kind of an idea. Right. But younger workers previously, they talked about people should quit their corporate jobs. But on Gen Z, they're posting on social media. They like the structure. They're appreciative of the jobs. You have these people that are called corporate girlies. So they post their...
What's a corporate girl? Are you a corporate girlie?
They post their outfits.
Outfit of the day.
Outfit of the day
I do
that they wear
all
to
the
work.
time. Out on LinkedIn.
Bow tie of the day. You got to do it. But they just say they're happy. So they're kind of changing that narrative a little bit, whereas the younger generation was pushing to not go corporate. They're pushing that it's all about corporate.
Well, here's the stat in this story. Gen Z, Tom, has overtaken baby boomers in the workforce this year with 21 million of them employed full-time in the U.S. How about that? So we're yet again a minority here.
I don't know. It's great. Yeah. Thank you, Lisa, for making us feel so ancient.
You're welcome.
Lisa Mateo there with the newspapers this morning. This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast, bringing you the best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. You can also watch the show live on YouTube. Visit the Bloomberg Podcast channel on YouTube to see the show weekday mornings from 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern from our global headquarters in New York City. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen, and always on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Terminal, and the Bloomberg Business app.